Uhuru, and welcome to The Breakdown, brought to you by African National Women's Organization, ANWO, a mass organization under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. The Breakdown is a monthly news, analyst, and opinion program, as well as a platform for highlighting guests whose issues spotlight the international plight of colonized women struggling against colonialism. My name is Jay Mechi, and I will be your MC for today's broadcast. Today's breakdown, President Yejide will be talking with Penny Hess, the chairperson of the African People's Socialist Solidarity Committee, an organization of white people organizing in solidarity with the movement for the liberation of Africa and African people. APSC works under the leadership of the Uhuru movement, led by the African People's Socialist Party. Penny Hess is one of the three charged by the U.S. government for being a foreign agent for Russia. The others are Omali Yeshitela, chairman of the APSP, and Jesse Neville, chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. Penny has been a member of the African People's Solidarity since its founding in 1976. She is a tireless organizer who speaks throughout the US and Europe in an effort to educate people that white society everywhere owes its affluence and democracy to the enslavement and colonization of African and oppressed peoples. Hess believes that the only way for white people to understand the current crisis of imperialism is to unite in solidarity with the struggles for national liberation being waged by African and other oppressed peoples. Please consider donating if you enjoy this content. The African National Women's Organization is engaged in two major projects in the African community, and we need your support to continue the work. So thank you to everyone who made possible the phase one. Because your donations, we were able to raise $8,400. But in the meantime, we're streaming live on YouTube channels, Burning Spear TV, and the African National Women's Organization's page on Facebook. And I'm excited about today's discussion. Uhuru, and welcome President Yejide and Penny Hess.
Thank you, Jay. Appreciate that. All right. Uhuru, thank you so much for that introduction. And thank you so much, Penny, for agreeing to be on our program today as we talk about the case of the Uhuru 3. But part of what we're going to do before we get to that is learn a little bit more about you. You know, what makes you special? What makes you a special white woman? If that's the case. I know you don't like that, but like we're going to talk a little bit about, you're coming into political life and as far back as 1976. So let's talk about that. At what point, where were you at in your political journey in 1976 that brought you to the PSC and its founding and the struggles that, I know that happened around that time?
Uhuru, well, thank you so much for having me on, President Yejide, and just really want to salute you. It's an honor to be here and, to just say that African People's Socialist Party, the African National Women's Organization, just powerful organizations, and I'm honored to be part of the Solidarity Committee under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. So yeah, go ahead. I am getting a little feedback. I don't know why. Maybe is that something?
That's me. I'll mute myself. Okay. So I'll say the question again. Can you just tell us a little bit about? We'll start us from the beginning. Like, where were you at in your political journey that brought you to the African Revolution back when you started?
Uhuru. Well, first of all, I would say that 1976 was a time in history when, one, the African liberation movement of the 1960s had risen up, but had faced a serious attack by the U.S. government, COINTELPRO, and other forms of counterinsurgency that was a time that followed, assassinations of Fred Hampton and Martin Luther King and this period. And so these were things that I was not an activist, but I was aware of this. it was also a time when the U.S. was waging an illegitimate colonial war against the people of Vietnam. And there was a huge movement in the U.S., in many ways led by the African liberation movement of that period, against what the U.S. was doing and in solidarity with Palestinians. And of course, so these were historic. And as I said, before I came in to the African People's Solidarity Committee, I was not an activist, but I was aware. You couldn't help but being aware of what was going on all around you in that period of time, in the 1960s and mid 70s. I mean, in every different front. It was a time when the indigenous people were rising up, and they were at Pine Ridge and Wounded Knee, and the Puerto Rican population, the Mexican population inside the U.S. were all struggling, having been in many ways galvanized by the African liberation movement of the 1960s and 70s. So it was a powerful time, and that was the time that the African People's Socialist Party, led by Chairman Omali Yeshitela, was answering a question that had been raised in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee 10 years earlier in 1966, what to do about the white people. And in that time, the SNCC, as it was called, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, evicted white people from their ranks and told them, I was not a part of this, but I'm aware of the history, told them to go into the white community and organize other white people. But without the leadership of the African Revolutionary Movement, white people were not capable, of doing that, because we do sit on this pedestal of the oppression of African people. So, we can talk about that more, but I think that, it was a powerful period when all of these ideas and struggles and the voice of the African working class was out there in the world, and it was very, very dominant and set the terms for, even how white people had to see the world.
Sorry. Got a little bug in my face. Thank you so much for that. I think that is really important to really help people understand, like, the times at that time that served to do a lot of political education to the masses, even if you weren't necessarily involved in action or politics at the time. Everything was political, and it was shown in the streets, on the TVs, in every possible way. So I heard from a little birdie that you were considered once a feminist, and and that kind of brought you to the movement, I think, through the struggle for Desi Woods.
Well, when I joined the movement to free Desi Woods, which was led by the party, I wouldn't say that I was consciously a feminist at that point, but I do think that, in the sense that white feminism was born off the struggle for Black power, and the whole consciousness of African people as African. And I think that, a lot of white women were like, oh, they followed that course. And originally, the women's movement was called the Women's Liberation Movement, and the what is today called the LGBTQ movement was called the Gay Liberation Movement. And that concept of liberation came from African people, and it was, it was a period in which that just was about power. And I think that that's what the African liberation movement was about. It was about power, not integration, not against racism, as Chairman Omali Yeshitela says. And that there was a way that white women and LGBT sort of took these same concepts, but ultimately, in many ways, ended up being opportunist against the African liberation movement. And after, as the smoke from the guns of COINTELPRO settled down, who was standing were the women's movement, the LGBTQ movement, but the African movement had been crushed by, by this U.S. government. And white people did not stand in solidarity with African people in the face of this destruction, conscious destruction by the US government of the African liberation movement that had really changed the world and just sparked and was in unity with revolutionary movements of the Vietnamese people and Arab Palestinians back then. When I first came into APSC, the chairman was talking about Palestine and the Palestinian people. So that is the history of that. And I think that the thing that was really exciting for me is that it enabled being under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party enabled me as a white person to begin to feel connected to the struggles of the people on the planet Earth. And, as the chairman always says, gave us the opportunity to make our self-criticism, to have a principled relationship, not as the colonizer, but, as part of the movement to transform this world through political and economic power and an end to colonialism overall.
Thank you, Comrade. Appreciate that. You wrote a book called Overturning a Culture of Violence. And can you tell us a little bit about this book and what was the goal of writing it? Yeah.
Uhuru. Well, the book in many ways is based on many presentations that I had made over the years on different subjects. We found that in the solidarity movement, when we would be speaking and African people were there, they were like, yes, that's so right. But then when we were speaking and we were and let me just say, everything we learned from the chairman. I mean, everything he said. And so this whole understanding of what he called African internationalism and seeing the world through the eyes of the oppressed, that the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela enabled us to try to see that in a principled way. And, and I think that what we found was white people would always be, can you prove that? They always wanted to know, blah, blah, blah. So I decided that I would take the theory of Chairman Omali Yeshitela and prove that as I do, but I was going to document. If you see, there's like millions of footnotes in there. Everything is documented. So I wrote it as you would write a term paper. Basically, it was like footnote 1, 2, 3, 4, on every chapter, because I took the books that were available then, and there's so many more available now. I'm always wanting to do an update on that book, but there's so much. But it was one of the first books to expose sort of the truth about the myth of whiteness and what it meant, and just really tried to delve into that using books such as Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee about the indigenous people, and 100 Years of Lynching, which everybody should read that. I mean, it's incredible. It's just documentation. It's newspaper reports, as people on this call probably know, but newspaper reports of what was called lynchings, the terror that white people carried out against African people. And just using so many documented history books to put it together and speak to white people about, look, this is the truth, but there is a way forward. under the leadership of the African Revolution, and also talked about reparations and why white people owe reparations and what it meant that we do live in on stolen land with stolen labor, the resources of the stolen labor of African people, which has never been dealt with, and that, as we see, I would say the reparations question is the biggest question of our time, really. And again, the chairman made that the household word that it is. And so that's what overturning the culture of violence is about. It tries to document the real history. It shows, the lynchings. It shows just many, many histories of that. It shows white people's participation in the genocide and torture of the indigenous people. Just horrible things that we did, that we have to say, look, we're not this, and well, let me just say this: white people always try to present ourselves as, well, we're the rational ones. We're not, I don't know why you're getting so upset, because we can all get along and we can all, just this whole BS. And so this really is a book that said, we have to confront this. We have to take responsibility for this history and present. It's not over, and that there's no way that we are going to have a principled relationship to African people by just saying, can't we just get along now? It can't happen like that. There is, but there is a way that we can, and that's under the leadership of the African Liberation Movement, going back into the white community, raising reparations, return of the stolen resources, and just winning other white people to take this stand, which is what we do, in African People's Solidarity Committee and Uhuru Solidarity Movement.
What makes these organizations different from people like Tim Wise, and there's another woman that I'm aware of who also does like racial, white, stuff. And what makes USM, African internationalism, how Solidarity Comrades take it on different from that sort of talk?
I mean, I think that's really, really important. I mean, and let me just say this, because when people are extracting the question of racism, first of all, out of the reality of colonialism that exists, then it all is based on whether white people are going to change the ideas in their heads. And as chairman says, African people are not looking for a future with depending on what white people are going to think about them, and do not care, about that. And so it keeps the question of racism keeps white people in the center. It says that, that's the basis of progress. And the chairman turns that right side up by showing that African people's struggles, first of all, have been the basis of every progressive struggle in this country and in the world in so many ways. The struggle for Africa, the struggle for the liberation of African people. And, and so the chairman takes it out of racism, out of the ideas in white people's heads. And if it's a struggle against colonialism, as the chairman said, just as every oppressed people in the world is struggling against colonialism, not against racism. The Vietnamese people weren't struggling against racism. They were struggling against colonialism. And the struggle against colonialism means the colonized can have power, can have political self-determination over their lives. And also, as the chairman said, it's winnable. How do you know? He always asks the question, how do you know when white people could be, end their racism? Like, they come out with a little white flag and, it's irrelevant. and it, it just perpetuates the system that we have, and says that this system built on the enslavement and colonization of African people and the people of the world and genocide of the indigenous people could be perfected by white people changing the ideas in their heads. And that doesn't change anything for the struggle of African people or indigenous people in this country and around the world.
So then we have APSC and USM, with organizations under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, that has changed some minds, right? Like, that have been able to go to the white community, which is something that people should know, that these comrades go into the white community and do reparations work. Can you explain a little bit more about what that means as a member of APSC, as a leader of APSC, and its mass organization, USM?
Well, yeah, I think it's really important, and I think that when APSC was formed and the chairman was laying out, back in 1976, and the world was as it was in a period of upheaval and struggle and turmoil, etc., that you would, I don't know, you would just feel that you could be part of changing the world, but that it's it has to be, it's APS, let me just say this, it's APSC's work and USM to go in mandated by the African Revolution to show other white people not only the colonial reality and our relationship as the colonizers versus the colonized, but also white people are not going to lead a revolution that will bring in socialism or justice or the end to that, to the oppression of oppressed people. And that's, I think, the really key question that makes us different, because it's saying that the African Revolution is our revolution. The African Revolution is our revolution. It's not like, well, African people have this struggle and then white people have this struggle over here. It's one thing. It's one world. It's the chairman talks about dialectics, the relationship of all things and the interconnectedness of all things. And that, so I just think that this is what distinguishes it. This is what makes it so dynamic and really exciting, because it is not sitting around talking about our racism, in that way. Like I knew somebody that went to what did they call it? Like Tim Wise kind of thing. And they went to that stuff. And I was like, well, what really happens there? What do they do? What happens? And he said that it is really scary, because they, it's just like sort of, you have to tear down your brain in a certain way and rebuild it back up. And it's very, I don't know, this isn't about that. The chairman is like, under the leadership of the African Revolution, go out there and do the work, to organize in the white community, win other white people. And this is scientific, because African people can fight colonialism, but white people can fight colonialism too, the same system. And so I think it's just very positive, very dynamic, and it makes white people want to be part of it,
Yeah, thank you for that, Penny. I think it's really important to explain the fact that it's not based on what you think about Black people at any given time, but what you do to show your solidarity and your unity with the the liberation. So if somebody can come into your organization, it's like, oh my God, I'm so in solidarity. And then you ask them to do some outreach and they can't do that. Or you ask them to go to their families and talk about reparations and they can't do that, because sometimes it's easier for some white folks to be around Black people. I've seen them and talk about down with the man, as if they don't also recognize that they are white people and they sit on the pedestal of oppression. and of African other colonized people. And I think it's really important when you talk about this and say us, me, white people, me, like, and as a white woman who is under the leadership of the African Revolution, to acknowledge that even though you're doing this work, that it still applies to you. It's, it still applies to you. And I wonder if there's any, for somebody who's struggling with that. Well, I'm really curious about what it looked like when you're confronting white people in the community who might for the first time be seeing this type of organizing, and how has that been for you in organizing in the white community?
Well, I mean, I think that, Uhuru Solidarity Movement does have members in over 130 cities. And there's certainly a lot more that we have to do to get the word out that this even exists, that this is a stand. But I do feel that white people, I would say in my experience, that white people are very receptive to it, especially if they have not been in a white left organization. A lot of times that, well, this is Marxism and this is blah, 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 a kind of thing. But if we recruit just from, sort of unorganized white people, basically, that is our base. We don't go to the left. I mean, we certainly would speak there and do, and, speak in different things or organize at big demonstrations, that kind of thing. But we organize the unorganized. That's just, I think that regular white people who have not been contaminated by what is called Marxism or that kind of thing, which is actually probably, some kind of twisting variant of that anyway. But I would say that, that white people can be very open to this and want to be under the leadership of African people. And I think that's something that really resonates with a lot of white people. And I know, people from my generation, even people I've met on the plane or, just different things, who are like, oh yeah, I worked with the Black Panthers in the 1960s. I think it's something that a lot of white people want to have a relationship to the African movement, the African liberation movement, but don't know exactly how to do that. And that's where, this whole existence of Uhuru Solidarity Movement and APSC, African People Solidarity Committee, is, that's what our job is, to go out there and show white people how to do this.
Without getting too in the weeds, can you say a little bit more about why you think it's easier to organize the unorganized as opposed to people who have an idea about Marxism or some other kind of political left theory?
Well, I would say, I guess there's a lot of reasons for that, but there is a kind of, Marxism is something, or let's say the left, the US left, is something that, again, is based around the question of racism. It's based around the question of African people assimilating, quote unquote, into white society. And it doesn't say it like that, but that is exactly what its goals are. And it envisions a socialist, in the most left, I guess, sectors of it. It envisions a socialist society without anything that overturned the colonial relationship of power that white people have over African indigenous people. And it liquidates the question of national liberation, which the chairman chose is the critical, essential question, that African and indigenous people are oppressed people. They are colonized. So it liquidates colonization, even though some of them are trying to use those words now and trying to use the party's words without actually changing anything about who they are, because if they were real, they would come into, the African People's Solidarity Committee. So yeah, I think it's a really good struggle, and I think that the white left, what you would call the sort of mainstream, or even some variants of it, really follow Marx and Lenin and Mao without bringing in the reality of today. And what the chairman does that is so brilliant is uses Marx and Lenin and Mao, but brings in the essence, the theoretical and organizational question of colonialism, inside the borders of the US and around the world, and the conditions of African and indigenous people as the leading force, because they are the colonized facing the colonizer. The white left will tend to say it's one working class with different colors in it, or however they do that it's one oppressed working class, but then white people always still have power in that because of colonialism, and white people have never led a struggle to overturn colonialism, certainly not in Europe, or certainly not in the US.
So essentially believe you understand, because believe is subjective. Like, you understand that this question of the colonial question is the key contradiction here in terms of organizing regular white folks to people who have a theory that typically takes them off kilter. They take them in another direction that obscures the colonial contradiction, whereas you have these white folks who don't have any of that, who can more easily and readily understand, yeah, I'm on the pedestal of oppression, and I want to be in an organization that helps me, be on the right side of the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you see a lot of younger white people who want to be with Africans. I mean, I think you see that a lot, and a lot of times it could be from from an okay place if they take a political stand, and join the solidarity movement, and recognize that even in a situation where you have personal friends that are African, we're still dealing with colonialism and live in that reality. And so I think that there definitely are white people who who are very much open to that and see it. And for me, it just like, wow, this makes so much sense. It really just clarified everything that I wanted to know about the world and how it got to be the way it is, and what it is going to take to overturn these conditions. And certainly the leadership of the African liberation movement made it was just so clear.
I have two more questions before we switch over to, I won't say it's a switch, but before we journey into the Uhuru 3 case. Why was it, I wouldn't say easy, but what kind of process did you have to go through in order to accept that? Was it just like, yeah, it clicks, it makes sense, and I as a white woman need to be a part of this organization because it makes sense? Or was there some struggles that you had to go through in order to say, I am a colonizer and I need to, be in league with African revolution? And yeah. Okay.
I think that, yeah, that was a really important and key struggle in APSC. And certainly I was part of it, and we did have to go through it being, yes, I am a colonizer. It's not theoretical. This is real. And there was, I would say, in the early years of APSC, there was a generalized sense the African Revolution was over here and the white revolution, however that would play itself out, was sort of over here. And they were two different things. And so it took the chairman several years to win that, to really win that with us. And it really sort of came to a head about 9 years after the formation of APSC in the 1980s, in the mid 80s, when it just came to a huge struggle, and the party intervened, the chairman intervened in that struggle. And there were a number of people who left APSC at that time because the chairman made it very clear that is not a parallel organization. This is an organization under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, but also that the African Revolution is our revolution. There's not going to be another revolution of white people. That would be, like Nazi Germany, as the chairman says. So I think it was really important, and it did take many years to go through all the levels of, I guess, the nuances of all this struggle and have it come to a head. And it was very exciting, actually, very exciting when it happened. And when it did happen in 1985, we united, those of us who stayed in APSC, which was probably somewhat the majority of the people, in the struggle overall. We said very clearly, our work is reparations. We can't, we just said that's what it has to mean. It has to mean, because let me just say this too, the struggle came down around that APSC had a responsibility to raise resources for the party, and that there were people who, who did not want to do that. That was really sort of the edge of that struggle. And it was very important. And that's when, we understood this question of reparations, that these resources belong to African people. Everything that we have came at the expense of African people, and the resources are simply being turned back over to those from whom they have been stolen. It wasn't a favor. It's a revolutionary stand,
I mean, I know a little bit about, a little bit. Chairman has said this on time and again. We've heard the history of development of APSC, and there was some very serious struggles that happened in terms of like ownership of, the white APSC comrades or members claiming ownership over the things that were developed on behalf of the party, or the party had developed that they were given control over. And, it's that same kind of this thing where I'm gonna say that I unite with the struggle for African people to be liberated, but I just want to control everything.
Right,
And
exactly. That is exactly what happened. And yeah, and so it took, just to go through all that, to go, just all the levels of it. That's all I can say. It's like it would always be deeper. This has to go deeper, and it did. I think it did in a good way. Not that struggles are over, because they continue, certainly, but that I think on that level, so that we were able to articulate to other white people, this is who we are. This is who we are, and that we understand parasitism, parasitic capitalism, and, just the history. That's part of what the book Overturning the Culture of Violence was about, to really express, to the African internationalism, to other white people, and what it is that we need to do in terms of the stand of reparations and genuine solidarity with the African liberation movement and the African People's Socialist Party.
And here you are since 1976, and it's 2024. What is that? That's like 48 years.
It's almost been 48 years, by the way. Yeah.
I'm 46. I was born in 78, Penny.
Oh, okay.
It's 48 years.
Okay, yes, 48 years.
It's 48 years since you taken this stand. And now we have you, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the founder of this movement, who's dedicated his life to the liberation of African people and organizing around the world for over 50 years. And Jesse Neville, who is chair of Uhuru Solidarity Movement, or USM, who are named as co-conspirators in a case that has named, that says that you are foreign agents acting on behalf of Russia, and that what you have been involved in, everything that we've heard up until this point, has been, but not up until this point, not since 1966. They've only identified a certain year, like some 2015 or something like that, where they said that you were working on behalf of Russia. You and the other comrades are working on behalf of Russia. Yeah, you were working on behalf of Russia. These are the reasons why. And we're going to take you to trial, and we're going to try to lock you up for 10 to 15 years for doing that. Can you tell us a little bit about, well, first there was, in July 29th, the day before my birthday in 2022.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was, actually, we had the NCC meeting. I went home the same day, the day before, and I had a birthday day after the race. So it was July 29th, 2022, when the FBI raided the homes and businesses of the Uhuru movement in St. Petersburg, Florida, and in St. Louis, Missouri. They attacked the chairman in his home, chairman and deputy chair. They went to the Uhuru Solidarity Movement Center in St. Louis, broke in to that location, and held you and others at gunpoint, and the chairman at gunpoint. And then at the same time, because they do these things coordinated, they were in St. Petersburg, Florida, breaking into the Uhuru house there, taking documents, stealing items and records and all of these things to try to build a case to justify their claim that you are a Russian foreign agent. And it wasn't until like a year later, we had a number of non-indicted co-conspirators. You were still named in that. But a year later, they actually came down with the final indictment, which named you
the indictment,
chairman and Jesse as indicted. Yeah, with the indictment. So can you tell us a little bit about what that experience has been like, and how you understand it up to this point, and we'll talk about it, into deeper context.
Uhuru. Well, first of all, I would just say that I mean, I salute the Chairman Omali Yeshitela's brilliant leadership for forming the Hands Off Uhuru Fight Back Coalition, which has brought together just an amazing grouping across the entire political spectrum, from libertarians to leftists to, all kinds of people standing with the Uhuru movement. Very powerful. And it's one of the typical things that how, the colonial state can never really win, because they gave the Uhuru movement the opportunity to win relationships with organizations that maybe they wouldn't even have had before, so in that way, it's the chairman has done a really amazing job. And yeah, so I just think, could you just say what your question was again? I'm sorry.
Since you've been named as a indicted conspirator, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is that we are charged with nothing but words, nothing but our words. There is no, the attorneys say, everybody says, there is no other action. It's not like, oh, we said these things against the government and then we did this something. We didn't. There was no other thing that we did. There was nothing. We're innocent. The party did not do anything that they said. And everything, all of the words of the party are covered under the First Amendment. And this is a completely unprecedented case, and it is a case to set a precedent so that the US government can basically criminalize dissent or anything that they don't agree with, any words that they don't agree with. It is a test case. It is something that is using two US laws or statutes, 951, which is not, a lot of people think it's the Foreign Agents Registration Act. That's not what we're being charged under. It's called 951, which is saying that a diplomatic or consular officer or attaché acts in the United States as an agent of a foreign government without prior notification to the Attorney General. And that is 10 years in prison for that. And then 18 US Code 371, conspiracy to commit offense or to defraud the United States. Which is, there's nothing about the African People's Socialist Party or Uhuru movement that is in any way conspiratorial. Everything is public. It's in the pages of the Burning Spear, what it stands for, the platform of the party, and it calls on anybody, all white people, people around the world, to stand in solidarity with the right of African people to political and economic power, to reparations, and to self-determination. So it's completely absurd, but they do that. This is what the US government does. In the 1960s, it had a program called COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, that involved as we talked about earlier, the assassinations of members of the Black Panther Party and many others, African people who were struggling for power, for Black power. Prior to that, W.E.B. Du Bois was charged with almost exactly the same things that Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the Uhuru Three are charged with. There was, just so many, Paul Robeson before that, just so many African, Marcus Garvey, so many African people who in history fought for power were attacked through the same kind of laws, the same kind of being called foreign agents, unregistered foreign agents, and that kind of thing. So it's what this government does. It does not want to have African people, it doesn't want to give African people the ability to have free speech, or what the chairman calls anti-colonial free speech, the right to advocate for freedom and liberation, for African liberation. That is not allowed in this government, under the system, under the colonial system that we live in. And that's the crime, and again, it's the speech. And I feel like the target of this attack is Chairman Omali Yeshitela. The attack on Jesse and myself is part of the attack on the chairman, because part of what it's attempting to continue to do is, deepen any isolation of the African liberation movement, and to separate and crush any kind of white solidarity or other kind of solidarity that would be there. So, but in fact, what this has done has built the just the breadth of genuine solidarity with the African People's Socialist Party and the Hands Off Uhuru, with hundreds of individuals and organizations who say, we stand with the Uhuru movement. We stand with Chairman Omali Yeshitela. So, yeah, so they weren't able to crush this movement in any way. it backfires, just as always.
I mean, we even had an interview with Tucker Carlson, which
Right,
is the
right.
white man to the whole world, who united with the right to African people to say whatever it is that we want to say, and based on the principles that this country claims that it is distributing with itself, right, but also around the world. And I think one of the things that it really exposes is this question of democracy that it claims that it wants to give to peoples and places around the world, but we already know through the barrel of a gun, because they bring democracy through warfare, and they bring democracy through counterinsurgency and duplicitous tactics. So this is the thing that the United States government has done around the world, because it is implementing it right here within its borders. And I think when we're in a time now where we see the war against the Palestinian people, and the United States unequivocally standing in line with Israel, not because, in my view, it just like Israel, because it's a strategic front for the United States in that region to stay there. And there's a genocide that is happening to Palestinian people. People are losing their lives. Entire communities are being wiped out. And the United States said that they're procuring democracy. In the same time, this is a Biden-Harris government, a Trump government, not some, MAGA government, as people would like to try to say that they're voting to save us from. But this is a Biden-Harris government that has decided to do these raids, put you all on trial. Like, what more does this expose about the false sense of democracy within the United States?
Well, I mean, again, like the chairman said, it can't be democracy for white people at the expense of African people. I mean, that is, terrorism, or that is colonialism. And that that if there is a belief in democracy that white people have, then it has to be the right of African people, and African people have to have the freedom of speech of African people cannot be prescribed to just what white people want them to say. They have, going to say that they have to fight for their freedom and liberation. And that's why the chairman has called it the anti-colonial free speech movement, which is really powerful and really, really brilliant. And I do think that, that it is, I'm glad you brought up the thing about Tucker Carlson, because again, that shows the, across all political lines, that is so brilliant in terms of the strategy of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, that that's all he's saying. Anybody who believes in free speech has to back up and stand with the African People's Socialist Party and Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And I feel like Tucker Carlson did that in a great way. Like, I like this guy, he was saying, but the principle of the the question of free speech, that he believed in that, so he has to stand with the chairman, and it's powerful. It's powerful the way that just this dialectical way in which Chairman Omali Yeshitela moves in the world and wins whatever is there, and turns around all attacks by the colonial state to make it into a victory. The Vietnamese did that too. They turned every attack into a victory, and it's brilliant. It's very much very exuberant to be able to be on the winning side, because clearly, we're going to win, and African people are going to win, and the oppressed and colonized people. This is what we're seeing in the world. And when we see, the incredible heroic Palestinian people on the forefront right now of colonial violence, and they're not, they're not backing down. They're not backing down.
They're not fighting for racism. They're not fighting against racism.
Right. Exactly.
It's not a racist It's a settler colony question. And I think when people see that, it's easier for them to understand. And I think what happens to African people here in this country, which are domestic colonized, and it's the same struggle. Like this is a settler colony, which constantly gets obscured. This is not some, this is a settler colony of white folks who came here and destroyed the people and the land and brought its droves of white people here to dominate and oppress the indigenous folks and to enslave African people for the benefit of white, this colonial project. And I think it's really important to the point that you raised again about Tucker Carlson being, it's a line that is drawn. If you're pro-American, right, and you like, I believe in the Constitution and the First Amendment, then you be like, and you don't unite with this thing, that means you don't believe in your First Amendment and the right. Then you show, your white nationalism on Front Street right there. So it's set for Black people or colonized people to do things. And I think when that first came out, there was some struggle, I think, amongst people who hate Tucker Carlson, because they were just like, how is it that, but then also it was like a call to the rest of the folks who be like, Tucker Carlson can unite with this fight against why can't we, right? Like that's the general question. And we're politically more aligned to the Uhuru movement than he is, So what then is the contradiction in how we support it? And that's why we have all these endorsers, like you said, that go across the political line. And I think that's really, it was great to see that. It's very, it's very winning and unifying, I think, because often, what I hear as a job that I get paid for is I'm in a social movement, and there seems to be a disorganization amongst the left, right? Like it's not an organized body of people, and that don't have a real unifying to what end. And I think just briefly, this case is a unifying to what end, for people who have been disorganized and don't know where they want to go, that this line, this struggle for anti-colonial free speech, but also this struggle against colonialism, which is what is being waged here, is really important. What has been, go ahead.
I do think that I think what Chairman Omali Shatella has done is I don't know what the word would be, not redefined, but like made it clear that what is progressive, anything that calls itself progressive can't call itself that unless it stands in solidarity with the African liberation movement, because that is the key thing. That is the key question in the whole world. And he has shown that, because, yeah, Tucker Carlson, but where's Democracy Now? Or where's all these left, groups and shows and all this stuff? They're not there. But the thing is that, I just think that the key question is, where do you stand for white people? Where do you stand in relationship to the African liberation movement? And the chairman, this attack on the leading party of the African liberation movement, has defined the question that's out there. And that's why it can no longer just be free speech. It has to be anti-colonial free speech. It has to bring in the colonial question. And I think, I think the chairman has just moved so brilliantly with this and forced it, forced the question. And I think that, the whole way that this hands-off Uhuru struggle has been led is something that will continue to influence in the future. Like as we go forward, it really, we're going to see the ramifications of this, of what, how the chairman has defined this, and the colonial question once again being the number one question on the agenda of not only the world, but not only the US, but the world, the entire world.
We have some comments that are happening, and I saw some questions that are being asked in the chat, and we're going to get to that in a minute. And before we get to announcements, which is before questions and answers, Penny, can you just give us a timeline of what's happening now and how we are preparing for the trial that's set to start on September 3rd?
Yes, well, thank you. I mean, and it's been great to be, really an honor to be on the show and everything, and you know, exciting, and I'm glad that people are looking. Well, first of all, the party and Hands Off Uhuru is building the August 31st rally, which is really 2 weeks from yesterday. So it's really coming up. That's going to be here in St. Pete, which is where I am, St. Petersburg, Florida, which, for anybody who doesn't know, is right across the bridge from Tampa, where the court will be. And then the trial begins September 3rd. So that is Tuesday, because the Monday is a U.S. colonial holiday. So the trial begins on the Tuesday. And, you know, right now we just, every day we have people saying they're coming. There's certain forms that people can go to handsoffuhuru.org and sign up a form and let the committee know, and Chair Mawezi, who's the chair of Hands Off Uhuru, know that that you're coming. But then I know we're talking to people who just casually say, oh, and by the way, this whole group is coming and that whole group is coming. And, you know, I think that there would be a lot of people who are going to come out with this. And we know of, you know, a few hundred right now, but I think it's going to be really, really important for the prosecutor, for the state, to see that all of these people are out here, you know, across the board, standing with Chairman Omali Shatella and the Uhuru Three.
Thank you, Comrade. So we're going to take a hot second here to have Comrade Jay come back onto the screen to give us some announcements. And then we'll come back with questions and answers and continue our talk until we close out our program. Uhuru.
Uhuru, that was great. Thank you. Let me bring our presentation up here. All right. There we go. Yeah, so we're wrapping up tonight's program. I hope that you are motivated to contribute to the Mecca for Women in the form of ANWO's Liberation Center. But before closing out, we have some important announcements, and then we'll do questions. But reminder, we have a $250 goal towards fundraising for the ANWO Liberation Center. Join ANWO. So if tonight's program has inspired you or motivated you, we call on African women worldwide to join the African National Women's Organization. We are the only anti-colonial, anti-colonial, anti-imperialist revolutionary organization for Black women. And we have members in Africa, Europe, Latin America, and all over the US. ANWO is leading on everyday issues concerning African women. We're not just on the internet. We are on the ground in communities organizing for African liberation. Join the international collective of African women building the revolutionary capacity of African women. To learn more about membership and to join, visit anwouhuru.org/join. ANWO is an organization of the African poor and working class, so we need your support to establish the international Mecca for African women. We're calling on members, followers, viewers, and anybody else that unites with establishing a working class embassy, a hub for community empowerment, and a testament to the resilience of the African people. Don't wait until this program ends. Pledge your support today. Let me just get this video playing.
The African National Women's Liberation Center is an ambitious initiative born from the vision to transform 4617 Natural Bridge Avenue into a vibrant facility. This space, generously donated by the African People's Education and Defense Fund, will become a working class embassy, a hub for community empowerment, and a testament to the resilience of African people. But we can't achieve this vision alone. We need your support to bring this dream to life. Your donation toward our goal of raising $60,227 will fund the comprehensive rehabilitation of the property. Why should you donate? Because every contribution brings us one step closer to providing working class African women with a property of their own, a place where they can heal, organize, and thrive. Why are we doing this? Because we are committed to advancing the cause of African self-determination. Our center will provide vital cultural, social, and community spaces that celebrate African people and serve as a catalyst for change. Additionally, as the headquarters of the African National Women's Organization, the center will serve as a national and local organizing space empowering African women and friends in our struggles against the impact of colonial capitalism. Your support can make a profound difference in our efforts to uplift African women and femmes. Join us in our mission to strengthen our community, nurture resilience, and pave the way for a brighter, more equitable future. Together, we can ensure that the flame of African self-determination burns brighter than ever before. To donate and to learn more about the project, visit bit.ly/AnwoCenter1.
All right. Consider becoming a sustaining donor. With sustaining donor levels starting at $5 a month, we welcome one-time donations of any amount because every dollar helps to buy nail, drywall, flooring, plumbing. To donate anytime, you can go anytime at anwouhuru.org/donate. And if you are in the St. Louis area and can donate your skills, please reach out to info@anwouhuru.org. All right, wear your politics with Anwo. Anwo's shop features t-shirts, sweatshirts, travel bags, mugs, hoodies, and even socks, and lots more things. So go to www.anwouhuru.org/store to wear your politics. And support our economic development project, Decolonize. Become a decolonizer, what we call our distributors and customers of Decolonize Hair and Body. Decolonize Hair and Body are natural personal care products that highlight ingredients and traditional care practices used by Indigenous people around the world, in addition to featuring images and quotes of African revolutionaries. And they're really good. From butters and conditioners to oils, Decolonize has you covered from head to toe. Make your next purchase of skincare products from us at decolonize.org. Decolonize.com. And all out for the trial. The federal government is moving forward with the bogus charges against the Uhuru 3. Chairman Omali Yeshitela, leader of the African People's Socialist Party, Penny Hess, chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee, and Jesse Neville, chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. The trial date has been set for September 3rd, 2024 in Tampa, Florida. The Uhuru 3 are calling on the people to show up for this historic trial and to participate in the Not One Step Backwards March and rally on August 31st in St. Petersburg, Florida, pushing back the attacks. The charges against the Uhuru 3 revealed historical and ongoing escalation of attacks on free speech rights, freedom to organize, and freedom to struggle for the liberation of African, Indigenous, and all oppressed people of the world. Drop the charges on the Uhuru 3. Hands off Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Volunteer with us. So if you enjoyed tonight's program and would like to help us produce shows in 2024, volunteer with us. Anwo is looking for interpreters, video editors, chat moderators for future broadcasts and programs. You can email us at info@anwouhuru.org if you'd like to share your skills. And if you're, so Anwo Economic Development Committee is growing and evolving with new opportunities. So consider volunteering your skills or develop new skills. We are currently seeking a grant coordinator and a donor coordinator. Send an email to info@anwouhuru.org if you're interested. This committee meets bi-weekly. And the War Council serves as a military decision-making body providing strategic guidance and advice to security forces and the defense members. So if you're interested in joining the War Council, you can also email at info@anwouhuru.org. And we have our One Nation, One Africa market. If you're interested in becoming a vendor, go to oneafricamarket.com/vendors. And we have the next market date on August 24th. So study, fast, train, fight. So with ANWO LA, Tuesdays and Thursday mornings. You can register at anwouhuru.org/events. And hold on one second. I think, yeah, that's today. So Harriet's Daughters Book Club and Study Group is a monthly virtual discussion that centers around African liberation-related literature. Our September book of the month is Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler, published in 1993, set in 2025 California. The events and rhetoric of this Afrofuturistic literature eerily resemble current times. The next discussion will be September 8th, 2024 at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, and is open to all African women, femmes, and those who are in solidarity with ANWO. Visit anwouhuru.org/events to stay up to date of all upcoming international, national, regional, and local programs and events. And I think that's it for our announcements. All right.
Thank you, Jay. You did so good. You took over for Coco this time around, but you did great. Thank you so much. So we're going to open it up for questions and answers. And Penny, you can come back on. I think you are able to. Jay, can you just take off for?
There we go.
We have some comments and questions that we've pinned so far. Don has been lighting up the comment section, and let's take them. So it says, Uhuru comrades, I think that the white left and fascism dominates because of the constant programming and screen time that they get. Even the most so-called radical African groups are talking about fascism, but they have constant programming. What are y'all's thoughts about that? Well, I'll take the part about African people and African groups, right? I think, generally speaking, that this is a popular word that kind of does what the white left, what Penny explained that the white left did earlier, which is obscures the colonial question. When you're a fascist and you're fighting fascism, then you can kind of lump yourself in, white people can kind of lump themselves in with the experiences that have been happening to African people before fascism was invented or before it became a way to explain this kind of oppression and exploitation that was happening to white people from white people in Europe. And so, I think as African people, we talked about this on Friday's program, but we can see that historically, like the conditions that are being talked about now in terms of oppression, freedom of speech, and all these other kinds of things have been struggles that African people have had to fight through since Africa was first attacked. Yeah, I would just say that, and I don't know, Penny, you want to say anything about that in terms of like the white left? But you said already.
Well, by the way, I just wanted to say I'm a big fan of Parable of the Sower and Octavia, and I've read that book multiple times, and I really want to come on that. So I think it's such an amazing book.
She's a prophet.
Really incredible. So the fascism, I think, yeah, I unite with what you're saying, and I think the thing that the chairman says is that makes it so clear and is so simple. Fascism is when white people experience conditions that African people face through colonialism every day, So it's when white people get a taste of what colonialism is like. And so that, people tend to say right now, white people tend to say, oh, we're in a period of fascism. But the reality is, African people are in a state of colonialism every day. And colonialism is the total power that a white person has, that white people have over an entire oppressed and colonized population, which also drains and steals all their land and resources from them for the benefit of the white population. So, yeah, so I just think that's a really important definition that the chairman has laid out very clearly and simply.
One thing I think it's also interesting to add is just to think about, like, what do we mean when we say the white left in the U.S.? Because the what is considered left in the U.S. is center anywhere else, and the ideas of the left are very much divorced from economics, which is what determines whether you're left or so-called left. The ideas of the so-called left in the U.S. are often very diverse or divorced from economics and instead centered on identity politics. And so while Black and trans folks and queer folks and women, economically, materially, our lives are getting worse and worse, the rhetoric is getting maybe nicer. And that's what comes to represent, like, the left, is these material policies that are still harming people of color, harming people of all different marginalizations, yet because they're using, like, the right words around identities, then they're assumed to be progressive. And, like, we're seeing that right now with Kamala. Like, they're saying she's communist, which is, like, the most absurd thing on the planet. Like, that couldn't be more absurd to say that she's communist, because she's a neocon, like all the Democrats, but they're considered left somehow.
Well, I think that that even certain, people that you're talking about, like LGBTQ, I think that white people overall experience, they're still colonizers. They might be LGBTQ colonizer. They might be, a worker colonizer, but it's still colonialism. And that you can't put, because the colonized African people and indigenous people, no white person experiences that, regardless of what other, if it's a woman, a white woman. White women were key in the lynchings of African people, and the assaults on the indigenous people were absolutely key and leaders of that. And and other ones were people that that fought for greater power for white people within sitting on the pedestal. So yeah, so I think that the key question is African people, the colonized people. That's how I understand it from the chairman, and it makes so much sense because it everything, it's like the chairman said, it's the pedestal, the colonization of African, indigenous, and the Palestinians is the pedestal upon which all white people sit. And if we look at it like that, it's very clarifying. And yeah, I mean, of course, it's not saying that white people can't struggle for, certain kinds of issues, but it's meaning that unless it's grounded in solidarity under the leadership of the African Revolution, then it's just a continuation of white power with another face. I think that's really, for me, that's really liberating to, to see that.
Yeah, and I think it's hard for people to, not me, but like some people, right? Like, because what you were saying earlier about the whole question of, like, when you are learned in some of the political theory out there in the world, Marxism, whatever, it's like really hard to divorce yourself from this idea that that we're not all in the same boat. And the reality is that the pedestal is really the key piece, like you were saying, like the chairman says, like the pedestal of oppression that, that is felt. And when I say some people it's difficult for some people, what I mean is that the people who are white and trans or white and disabled and experience certain kinds of exploitation and oppression because of this designation, um, for them to accept that they are also white and sit on the pedestal of the oppression, regardless of the fact that you may be trans or disabled or so have some other kind of ism that would make you a marginalized white person. So I appreciate you for raising that.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, I think it is liberating to understand it. And it just makes sense. It's scientific. It is scientific, this whole sense of the pedestal, and all white people sit on the backs of African people. Just to say, I mean, in the United States, the LGBTQ population, according to even statistics I've read in the government's own thing, is among the highest income of the entire United States.
That isn't necessarily true for Black folks, though, which I think
no,
it's, and when I'm talking about like different marginalizations, I'm often talking in reference to, Black folks, just because those populations are less likely to be assimilated. And so we have now this kind of comprador class of like Black colonizers like Kamala and these people that have very like normative identities. And meanwhile, Black disabled people, Black trans people, like the average lifespan of a Black trans woman is 35, which is half the lifespan of most people. So, just to be clear, when I'm talking about these identities, I'm sort of talking about them in the context of colonized people, because those folks are often invisibilized, like that kind of dichotomy of like either Black or LGBT or Black or disabled, like, whereas, how we understand sexuality and gender is colonized. How we understand a world that is like ableist, like is a colonized. It's a colonized world that decides that like people that have disabilities have lesser worth because they don't fit within the capitalist system in the way that benefits the colonizer. So just wanted to insert that point in there.
Uhuru, thank you. Yes.
So we have some more comments. Same from Don, and there might be more after this. But Don, I don't know if it's a comment, question, or just a point of that you wanted to share, but you said thesis. Beginning the process of evaluating the numerous economic effects of unequal distribution of income and wealth in the U.S. requires an independent and revolutionary analysis and interrogation of the analysis produced by the ruling class in the imperialist center. Topic 1, contradiction of the analysis which served to explain production and distribution of the capitalism and the plan for securing this, its well-being, so-called political economy or economics are discoverable through assessing the major theories in macroeconomics. This is so thesis-like, so academic, but I get the gist of it, Conrad, and I appreciate you because Don is someone who is in academia and challenges academia and the colonization that happens within these walls that basically reinforce colonialism intellectually and beyond, right? So I think, I think we should examine and dissect colonialism at all points and macro, micro, all of it, because I mean, I used to be a economic major. I stopped being an economic major and I was not politicized at the time, but because when you go deep into supply, demand, and all of these sort of contexts of capitalist economics, you start to realize that this is a figment of your imagination. None of it is real, and it is controlled by the people who hold power. And
it is unscientific, completely unscientific. It defies the laws of physics. You cannot have infinite growth on a finite planet. That is like against the laws of biology, physics, science. Like,
it's not. I mean, and I understood that as somebody who was not political at the time, and I was like, this is crazy, and I think when you have, like I said, it's about the people who have power over it, right? And 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 if the African working class had power, right, the economics looks different. The way that people determine what the economic landscape looks like would be a different kind of economic. It wouldn't be this stupid capitalist economic explanation. And yes, Don, I wanted to be a stockbroker in another life.
Wow. All right.
I'm glad we don't live in the timeline where that came true. I'm glad we live in the timeline where you decided socialism was the way.
And I did become a stockbroker because I went to college and I started learning about economics. And I'm like, oh no, I'm not going to do this.
Right. The more you learn about it, like I actually took a course from capitalists recently just to learn more about like their thoughts around capitalism. And even the teacher was like, well, technically finite growth on or infinite growth on a finite planet is like against the laws of physics, but we just kind of pretend it's the truth. And it's like, it's pure fantasy, purely unscientific.
Well, we are winding down, and I just want to thank you so much, Penny, for being a guest on The Breakdown and really giving us some backstory about who you are and why you decided to be an African revolutionary, right? Why you were fighting for the African Revolution and what that has brought you to today, which is, we're, weeks away from a trial that can decide your freedom or your political prisoner status, right? Like, and we are going to fight like hell so that you do not become, Chairman does not become, Jesse does not become a political prisoner in this U.S. concentration camp that they use to store political prisoners. So is there any last final thoughts that you wanted to share before we close out today's program?
Well, just really want to thank you. This has been such a great program. Really want to thank you, President Yejide and Jay. And it's been an honor to be part of this. And I just want to let everybody know, be there, be in St. Petersburg, Florida on August 31st for the Not One Step Backwards rally, Freedom Summer Rally. We will win. We go to court on September 3rd, on Tuesday, September 3rd. The only way that we can win, as the chairman has said, is through the people. We have some great lawyers, but the people is what's going to show them that they cannot do this legal lynching, and just really be on the winning side. It's very exciting to kick the ass of the ruling classes. As the chairman says, and Deputy Chair Onizane and Shatella. So it's an honor to be here again. This has been great. And thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, Penny. And we're going to have you on again after we win, right?
Yes.
Then we're going to bring you back on and have a victory dance on the ruling classes failure. So, thank you so much, everyone who came and viewed us today. And thank you so much for all of the chat and the questions. And we'll see you next month for another breakdown. Have a good night. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Hands off of